Man Visible and Invisible by C.W. Leadbeater. Chapter 5. The Trinity. We must now endeavor to understand how man comes into existence amidst this wonderful system of planes of nature. And in order to do that, we shall find ourselves compelled to take an excursion into the domain of theology. When we search these records in order to discover the origin of man, what do we see? We find that man is the resultant of an elaborate and beautiful evolutionary scheme, and that in him 3 streams of divine life may be said to converge. One of the sacred scriptures of the world speaks of God as having made man in his own image, a statement which, when it is properly understood, is seen to embody a great occult truth. Religions agree in describing the deity as threefold in his manifestation, and it will be found that the soul of man is also threefold. It will, of course, be understood that we are speaking now not of the absolute, the supreme, and the infinite, for of him, naturally, we can know nothing except that he is, capital H. But of that glorious manifestation of him. So these are all capitalized now. Every time we refer to the deity, to God, these nouns are all capitalized, okay? But of that glorious manifestation of him, who is the great guiding force or deity of our own solar system, who is called in our philosophy the logos of the system. Of him is true all that we have ever heard predicted of the deity, all that is good, the love, the wisdom, the power, the patience, and compassion, the omniscience, the omnipresence, the omnipotence, all of this and much, much more is true of the solar logos, capital S, capital L, solar logos, in whom in very truth we live and move and have our being. Unmistakable evidence of his action and his purpose surrounds us on every side as we study the life of the higher planes. As he shows himself to us in his work, the solar logos is undoubtedly triple, 3, and yet 1, as religion has long ago told us. It is obviously impossible to picture this divine manifestation in any way, for it is necessarily entirely beyond our power, either of representation or comprehension. Yet, a small part of its action may perhaps be to some extent brought within our grasp by the employment of certain simple symbols, such as those adopted in Plate 2. It will be seen that on the 7th or highest plane of our system, the triple manifestation of our logos is imaged by 3 circles representing his, capital H, his 3 aspects. Each of these aspects appears to have its own quality and power. In the first aspect, he does not manifest himself on any plane below the highest, but in the second he descends to the 6th plane and draws around himself a garment of its matter, thus making a quite separate and lower expression of him, capital H. In the third aspect, he descends to the upper portion of the 5th plane and draws around himself matter of that level, thus making a 3rd manifestation. It will be observed that these 3 manifestations on their respective planes are entirely distinct from one another, and yet we have only to follow up the dotted lines to see that these 3 separate persons are nevertheless, in truth, but aspects of the one, quite separate when regarded as persons, each on his own plane, quite unconnected diagonally, as it were, yet having his perpendicular connection with himself at the level where these three are one. Thus we see a very real meaning in the insistence of the Church that we worship one God in Trinity, and Trinity in unity, neither confounding the persons nor dividing the substance. That is to say, never confusing in our minds the work and the functions of the three separate manifestations, each on its own plane, yet never for a moment forgetting the eternal unity, capital E, capital U, eternal unity of the substance, which lies behind all alike on the highest plane. It is instructive to note here exactly the true meaning of this word person. It is compounded of the two Latin words, per, P-E-R, and sona, S-O-N-A, and therefore signifies that through which the sound comes. The mask worn by the Roman actor to indicate the part which he happened at the moment to be playing. Thus, we very appropriately speak of the group of temporary lower vehicles which a soul assumes when he descends into incarnation as his personality. Thus also, these separate manifestations of the one on different planes are rightly thought of as persons. Thus, we can see how it can be said that there is one person of the Father, capital F, another of the Son, capital S, and of the Holy Ghost, capital H, capital G. But the Godhead of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Ghost is all one, the glory equal, the majesty co-eternal. Truly, the manifestations are distinct, each on its own plane, and consequently one appears lower than another. Yet, we have only to look back to the seventh plane to realize that in this Trinity, none is afore and after another, none is greater or lesser than another, but the whole three persons, capital P, are co-eternal together and co-equal. So also every person by himself is God and Lord, and yet there are not three Lords, but one Lord. See also how clear and luminous become many of the statements concerning the second aspect and his descent into matter, his capital H. There is another and far wider meaning for this, as will be seen in Plate 3. But what is true of that grander descent is true also of this. For when we think of the aspect on the higher plane as the essential Godhead, ensouling the manifestation in matter relatively lower, though it's still high above our ken, we see how he, capital H, is God of the substance of his Father, begotten before the world, but man of the substance of his mother, born of the world. For as an aspect of the divine, he existed before the solar system, but his manifestation in the matter of the sixth plane took place during the life of that system. So, although he be God and man, yet he is not two, but one Christ, one not by conversion of the Godhead into flesh, but by taking of the manhood into God. One, that is, not only because of the essential unity, but because of the glorious power of drawing back into himself all that has been acquired by the descent into lower matter. But this belongs more especially to the great descent illustrated for us in Plate 3. The greatest schism, S-C-H-I-S-M, schism, the greatest schism which has ever occurred in the Christian Church was that between the Eastern and Western branches, the Greek Church and the Roman, the doctrinal reason alleged for it was the supposed corruption of the truth by the introduction into the creed of the word filioque at the Council of Toledo in the year 589. I'll spell that Filioque. Filioque. All right, let's go with that. The question at issue was whether the Holy Ghost proceeded from the Father alone or from the Father and the Son. Our diagram enables us to see what was the point at issue, and furthermore, it shows us, curiously enough, that both parties were right, and that they'd only clearly understood the matter, there would have been no schism at all. The Latin Church held quite reasonably that there could be no manifestation on the fifth plane of a force which admittedly came from the seventh, without a passage through the intermediate sixth. So they declared that he proceeded from the Father and the Son. The Greek Church, on the other hand, insisted absolutely on the distinctness of the three manifestations, and quite rightly protested against any theory of a procession from the first manifestation through the second, as would be typified in our diagram if we drew a diagonal line through the first, second, and third. The dotted line on the right of plate 2, showing how the third aspect descends through the planes and finally manifests on the fifth, is of course the key to the true line of procession and the absolute harmony of the two conflicting ideas. The wonderful way in which man is made in the image of God may be seen by comparing the triad of the human soul with the Trinity in manifestation above it. So astonishingly material have been the orthodox conceptions that this text has literally been interpreted as referring to the physical body of man and made to mean that God created man's body in a shape which he first saw as that which Christ would choose to assume when he came on earth. A glance at plate 2 shows us at once the true meaning of those words. Not the physical body of man, but the constitution of his soul reproduces with marvelous exactitude the method of divine manifestation. Just as three aspects of the divine are seen on the seventh plane, so the divine spark of the Spirit in man is seen to be triple in its appearance on the fifth plane. In both cases, the second aspect is able to transcend and descend one plane lower, and to clothe itself in the matter of that plane. In both cases, the third aspect is able to descend two planes and repeat the process. So in both cases, there is a Trinity in unity, separate in its manifestations, yet one in the reality behind. Each of the three aspects of persons or manifestations of the Logos has an especial part to play in preparation and development of the soul of man. What these parts are, we shall endeavor to make clear by the help of the diagram given in plate 3. The horizontal subdivisions indicate the planes precisely as in plate 2, and above them will be seen the three symbols belonging to the series described by Madame Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine. The highest represents the first aspect of the Logos and bears only a central dot, signifying the primary manifestation in our system. The second aspect of the Logos is symbolized by a circle divided by a diameter, showing the dual manifestation, which is always associated with the second person of any trinities, while the lowest circle contains the Greek cross, one of the most usual symbols of the third aspect.